This is Jim Bish with the Americans in Wartime Museum. Today's date is June 30th, 2018, and I'm conducting an interview with Dale Trompke in Kearney, Nebraska. Dale, would you please give me your full name and where you were born?
Dale Samuel Trompke was born in Sherman County.
Okay, and that's Sherman County, Nebraska, right?
Right.
In 1926, where did you go to school at?
I started school in, I don't remember the district, in Ravenna, south of Ravenna, Nebraska.
A rural school?
Right.
Uh-huh.
And then we moved into Ravenna, and then I went to school through the started the third grade. Then we moved back to Loop City. From Loop City, we moved to Kearney.
Okay.
And I went through. I started the 10th grade and I quit school and joined the Navy.
And so you were in Kearney going to high school when World War II was in.
Right.
Do you remember hearing about Pearl Harbor?
Yes, I was with my dad. We was in town that Sunday morning. I don't know what we went after, but we was coming down 25th Street and the papers were out,
Mm-hmm.
War broke out, or Pearl Harbor was attacked. And I think I was 15 then.
Yeah.
At that time.
Were you probably about 8th grade or freshman in high school?
Yeah, well, I was probably the 8th.
When all that happened.
Right.
Did that make a big impact on people around you when news came out?
Well, I come through the 30s, and it was dry, depression, no jobs, and my dad, he farmed. He had on my grandpa's farm, and he couldn't make it, so he sold out in 1930. That's when we moved south of Ravenna, and I started school at a district country school there.
Yeah. So times were already pretty difficult.
Oh, bad.
Yeah.
Nobody had nothing.
Did you have any older brothers or sisters?
No, I had a brother younger than me and a sister that were twins,
Mm-hmm.
and then a younger sister, which she's still alive.
Yeah. And so I was just asking that to see if any of them were going off to service right away when war broke out, but you were the older one.
Right.
Uh-huh.
My brother went after I got out. When I enlisted, I had signed up duration of the war,
Mm-hmm.
but I still got out on a point system.
Yeah. When you decided to sign up, how old were you? You said you quit
17.
high school early. 17.
I was 17.
Had you just turned 17?
Well, I enlisted the 15th of April of 1944. So I was, been 17 about 6-8 months.
Yeah. And what made you decide to sign up early?
Well, all my friends are gone into the service, and I had a couple friends. One was in the Navy. He was in the boiler room. He was what they call him, fireman.
Mm-hmm.
And I had another one that was in the Marines, and he was captured pretty early, right at the first part of the war. And I don't know, I just had the urge to leave.
It sounds like there were a lot of people in the Kearney area starting to enlist and enlisting when they could.
Oh, yeah. There was, I know of, they was older than I was because they was drafted. And 3 of them that were from Kearney that were killed in the war.
Yeah. When you enlisted, did you enlist specifically in the Navy, or were you put in the Navy?
No, I enlisted in the Navy.
In the Navy, okay.
Right. There was 2 of us. I had a buddy. We enlisted together, and they promised that we'd go together. Well, then it ended up we was ready to go to boot training, and he had appendicitis attack, so he ended up in the hospital. His appendicitis was taken out. So they let me stay a couple weeks, and then they said, no, that's as long as you can stay. And back then, you know, appendicitis attack is 4 weeks or better in the hospital. So we never got to go together.
Yeah.
So I went ahead and I went to Farragut, Idaho for training.
That's where they sent you to Idaho.
Right. Farragut.
For basics. How long were you in Idaho?
How long
was basic training in Idaho? How long?
12 weeks.
12 weeks. And what are some of the things you did during basic training? How was basic training to a boy growing up in Nebraska? Was it hard or was it fairly easy?
We had a pretty young company. It's 120 men in the company. And we had what they call the broken down rooster all the time on our barracks, because it was just a bunch of young guys, and one guy didn't know how to march any better than I did back then.
Yeah.
And when we got done, we was pretty good marchers. We used to have to march every Saturday in front of the command and show your stuff.
Yeah. What's the physical work hard as far as physical training?
Oh, well, you know, there's different things, you know. You learn to row a boat and just Navy stuff. Tie knots. Stuff like that.
Yeah. When you came out of basic training, then where were you sent to?
Well, from there I went on a troop train to Shoemaker, California. And that was a signing unit for personnel. You stayed there till, I guess, they found something for you. And then from there on, they got us up in the middle of the night and took us to Treasure Island in California. And that's where I shipped out of.
I should back up a little bit. Do you remember what day you went to basic training? You said you were 17 years old. Do you remember about what time of the year it was? And was it?
Well, it had to be sometime in, I'd say, May of 1944.
Okay, May of 1944.
Yeah.
So by mid to late summer, you were in basic training in Idaho.
Right.
And then after that, you went to
Shoemaker,
California, where they assigned you, and then they went to Treasure Island.
Treasure Island, right.
And that's where you boarded a boat?
Right, that's where I boarded a troop ship to Hawaii.
Okay. So that was probably late summer sometime you were on board a troop ship. Of 1944.
Right.
And do you remember much about, I'm sure that was probably the first time you were on the ocean, on that troop ship. Can you tell me about some of the memories you have of being on that troop ship?
They got us up 4 o'clock in the morning. I don't know if you know what a grinder is, that's the marching field. And we sat there till 9 o'clock that night before we got a ship to board. And we got out of bay about 3 hours, and we hit a storm. And everybody was heaving. Sick.
It was bad enough just to be on the ocean, but then hit a storm.
Hit a storm. I just remember that. Oh, it was a mess.
Probably never thought that storm was ever going to get over, huh?
I never really got real sick. If I'd lay down, I was all right, but I never did, you know.
Yeah. Just
heave or anything.
A lot of people around you did. Yeah. How long do you remember? How long it took you after the storm passed? Was it pretty good after that?
Oh yeah, it was pretty decent then. We got to Hawaii. It was pretty nice.
Yeah. But how long did it take you to get to Hawaii back then?
I think it's approximately 7 days. I always said it was a slow ship to China.
You were on your way, but it was getting there slow.
Yeah.
So when you arrived in Hawaii, did you have time in Hawaii then, or did you quickly get sent away?
I had a couple of weeks there. I was telling Jess about this. I went King, they call it King Street, which is in Honolulu. And there was so many servicemen, you couldn't even walk. And I got tired of saluting a buddy of mine. Him and I, we went, and I said, because, you know, enlisted man had to salute every officer.
Yeah.
And that's all we was doing. And I said, I'm going back camp. And I never did go back down.
Yeah.
That's enough for me.
Yeah, that would, I'm sure there were a lot of officers there.
Yeah.
So, were you in Hawaii very long then?
No, I was only over there about 2 or 3 weeks. And then they shipped me out.
When you were in Hawaii, did they just have you doing basic duties and assigned, or just waiting around?
You got
mostly?
put on a lot of work details,
Yeah.
you know, but most of them weren't that bad, you know, the last couple, 3 hours. But they kept you busy,
Yeah.
so.
You never, beyond that one excursion downtown, you never got to see much of Hawaii.
No.
Were you pretty close to the shore?
No, not really. And, you know, all the, you know, the everything had happened there before. I just wasn't crazy to see it anyhow, you know.
Yeah. Did you see Pearl Harbor while you were there?
No, I didn't. Well, I could see it, but I just
Nobody went
never
down
went there.
Yeah. What had happened?
Yeah.
So after about 3 weeks, they put you aboard another ship.
Right. I went. That's when I boarded a troop ship. We went to the Marshall Islands first because we had troops from the Marshall Islands. From there we went to Guam. Then from there I went to Tinian, and that's where I was stationed.
Yeah. What was your occupational specialty?
I didn't have any. I mean, I was just a apprentice seaman.
Apprentice seaman. Meant that you were open to do all kinds of
Yeah.
things.
I pulled a lot of guard duty.
And from the Hawaii, you basically ended up in Tinian then.
Right.
And what were you assigned to do while you were there?
I was in the military government in charge of prisoners of war. We had a stockade for the prisoners, and we protected the gooks. I mean, on the island, you know, from the servicemen.
Did how large was the war camp? Do you know about how many prisoners that were in the camp?
We had one tower, and it was all fenced in, and we could handle about 45, and we'd get up to 45, and then we'd have to ship them to a different place, you know, a bigger compound. But that wasn't on the island, it had to be somewhere else.
So you could only handle around 45 on the island.
Right.
And what was the typical day there? What are some things you did at the camp, as far as?
Well, mostly guard duty. We had guards at everything. We had, you know, like the prisoners. We had a tower that there was always guard 24 hours a day on. And then at the camp, we had a main gate. There was a guard on it 24 hours a day. And then we had another area where the civilians could come walk through. And we had guards there 24 hours a day.
Yeah. So this was probably in the fall now of 1944 that you were there?
I got there in December of 1944.
December, okay. Right before the end of the year.
Right.
And Tinian was an air base.
The biggest B-29 base in the Pacific.
And so I'm assuming you saw a lot of B-29s take off constantly while you were there.
I seen a lot of them. In fact, I was on guard duty the night the bomb took off. I heard the bomb was pretty hush-hush deal. And we finally found out 2 weeks after it come on the island that it was there. But we didn't know when it was going to leave or anything.
Yeah.
And then we found out that it was taken off, but then we didn't know what plane or anything. Because everybody was curious about that. And we never did find out till after it left.
Yeah.
But I watched every 15 minutes there's a B-29 taking off.
Every 15 minutes
Yes.
with their group
And
squadron.
that was just from the island of Tinian. See,
Yeah.
there was a B-29s on Saipan and Guam too.
Yeah. Yeah, that's, so how close was the camp, the prisoner of war camp, to the airfields? Were they very close
they
at all?
was long ways from
Long
there.
ways away.
Yeah. See, the island of Tinian, at the longest point, it's only 11 miles long.
Mm-hmm.
And the widest point was 5 miles wide.
Yeah,
So that isn't very big.
no. It was a ways away, but you could certainly, all the B-29s, they were loud and big, so
Oh,
you could see
yeah.
them all the time coming in and out.
Yeah. So, you know, it's a lot of people don't realize that Tinian had all those B-29s.
Yeah. So was Tinian cleared of Japanese, or were there still quite a few Japanese there on the island?
When I landed there, I landed on, there's no docks or no nothing, no harbor. I landed on this LCI, landing craft, and the island was secured for 5 miles inland.
Mm-hmm.
The width was all right, but the inland part, you'd go up to 5 miles, and that was the boundary line. You went past that, you're in trouble, because the Japs are still there.
Yeah.
And we lost 3 mail clerks, souvenir hunters. They found them, but I can't say what they done to them.
Yeah. Did you ever, or did anybody ever go out and try to clear the Japanese from those areas, or they just kind of left them?
I mean, even when I was in the military government, I mean, we had prisoners, guys coming out of the hills, and then we would send up interpreters trying to get them to surrender because, you know,
Occupied
the island
island
was
you didn't
taken
have it,
over
yeah.
anyhow. And then we had a big water tower we used to guard. And there was places that the coral was so heavy they couldn't bury the line, and they had to put it on top. And then the Japs would tap the water line to get fresh water without, you know, when it didn't have rain. And we guarded that. We had that well, and it was a wood tower, but we had it all sandbagged and everything to protect it.
So was the lines metal coming from it then?
What's that?
Were the lines metal that were over the coral coming from it?
Yeah, and they would do that most of the time at night, see? So we could hear them tapping. Well, we couldn't shoot low. You'd shoot low, then you hit the line. So you'd always shoot high, so we never knew if we ever hit any or not because they'd drag them off anyhow.
Right, yeah. Did they mostly living in caves?
In
Is that where they were at?
Right, yeah. They had what they call a suicide cliff. It was 65-foot jump. And a lot of gooks committed suicide because the Japs told them how mean we were and what we'd do to them, and
Yeah,
they'd run and jump off that cliff, commit suicide.
yeah. Before you left Tinian, were there still Japanese, unsurrendered Japanese on the island, or had everybody?
I left in May of 1946, and 2 of them come out of the hills that day. I left. The war had been over since
For a year
August,
almost.
You know.
And they were still some coming out.
Yeah.
It's interesting how long.
Yeah.
So what was a typical day? And first of all, it seems very interesting that you're in the Navy, but you're on land guarding
Right,
prisoners.
right.
You didn't spend much time on water.
No, it's mostly on land.
And how many guards were there at the camp at one time? Were you on 8-hour shifts or 12-hour shifts? Or
4 on
4 on?
and 8 off.
So
And the
every
one from midnight to 4 was the meanest.
midnight to 4 in the morning?
Yeah.
That's probably when they were out searching water and different things like that can happen.
That was a hard time to stay awake.
Yeah.
I used to walk around the guard gate all the time just to stay awake.
Yeah. How many guards were on service at one time? Were on the clock?
Oh, I don't, just in our area, I suppose at least 12, 15, I just don't remember. Because we had, quite a few places.
Were the prisoners all coming from Tinian, or did anybody from another island bring in prisoners?
I had a lot of these guys on work details. And I had one guy that was in the Battle of Burma with the Chinese.
Mm-hmm.
And he was bayoneted right through here, and the sword come out on the other side of him. And so he got wounded. Well, then they sent him back to Japan to the hospital to heal up. Well, he got healed up, so then he ended up on Tinian fighting the Americans or protecting Tinian.
Mm-hmm.
And then he was captured there. And I would say he was probably 20 years older than I was. And he told me, he talked kind of rough American, and he says, I don't want to fight no more. He said, I don't even want to fight, period. You know, he's just one of the guys, he said he had his belly full of it.
Yeah.
But, you know, I turned my back a lot of times to him, and, you know, he never tried to escape or anything.
Mm-hmm. Was that typical, or were there a lot of Japanese prisoners that were ready to fight if they could get out?
Well, you know, most of them were satisfied with what they were getting from the United States.
Mm-hmm.
They got their cigarettes. They got 3 meals a day. And then if they went out on work day, I think they got, if I remember right, 15 or 25 cents
mm-hmm.
a day for working, you know. And they loved it. I mean, you know, they never tried to break out.
Yeah.
It's a lot better life than they was leading.
Yeah.
So,
especially getting food and water and
right,
not getting
right.
shot at.
And getting their fish and beans.
Yeah. So what was the typical meal for the prisoners?
Fish, beans, and rice. And the fish was, most of it was raw.
Uh-huh.
The beans and the rice was cooked.
Yeah.
But, you know, they don't have heart trouble.
No. So you obviously, the Americans that were there were obviously getting different. What was your meals like?
Oh,
on
well,
Tinian?
just regular standard. I mean, there was times there when we first got there that we didn't have a warm meal. We had rations, sea rations they called it.
Mm-hmm.
And well, we got by.
Yeah. But the prisoners were given fish. Was this local fish that was purchased for the camp?
No, they had their own fishing crew. In fact, I and the first class boatswain were in the charge of this fishing outfit. I went with them once, and I thought, I looked back at it, you know, here I am by myself. Was
on a Japanese fishing boat.
12 of those guys. They could have thrown me overboard. Probably nobody ever knew it.
Yeah.
But we checked nets for tuna, and they would get lobster. Go dive in the caves.
So they basically worked for their own
Furnish
food.
their own fish, right?
Wow.
Yeah,
That I've not heard before.
yeah.
And they would eat it. Of course, they were used to eating raw fish, so they would eat it as they fixed it.
Yeah.
And the Americans provided them with the beans and rice.
Right.
Interesting.
Yeah.
Did and that went on. So you were there with the camp from May of or December of 2000 or 1944 up through 1946. Then in May of 1946.
Right.
You're in charge of the camp. How did the camp change after the war ended in August of 1945?
Well, after the war ended, why, we sent all the gooks, all the people on the island, you know, the civilians. We had to process them, and we sent them back to Japan.
Those that were not prisoner?
That weren't prisoners.
Okay.
They were just, you know.
They were the natives that had been on the
The
island.
lower class, you know, because that's Japan. They had about 3 classes of people, you know, the upper and the middle, and then the peons.
Yeah.
And so we had to process all that, make sure that they didn't have something going with them that didn't, that belonged to the United States.
Mm-hmm.
And we processed every one of them. And that was a chore. I remember one night, they said the ship wouldn't be in, so a bunch of us guys, we played pinochle all night, and that ship come in about 8 o'clock in the morning. We never even went to bed. We just had to go to work.
Keep going. So what did you do in processing them? What are some of the things that you
Well, you had to go
question?
through all their belongings, everything. They had to unfold everything, blankets, rugs, anything. And some of the guys, I mean, you could take whatever you wanted, but I just wasn't that kind of guy.
Yeah.
I felt sorry for them. And some of the guys, they'd take something for a souvenir.
Yeah.
I never did.
So all of their stuff that they had was left back in Tinian, and then they were boarded on ships going to Japan then?
Right. They were shipped back to Japan.
Mm-hmm. How were the prisoners released? Were they same way? Were they processed?
I just don't know.
Uh-huh.
After, things, we had so many things going on. When it come to the prisoners, why, I just don't know what they'd done.
Yeah. Yeah.
I'm sure they probably went back too.
Mm-hmm. And you said that even up to the last day that you were there were still some Japanese coming in and out of the hills.
Two of them come out of the hills the day I left. It's hard to believe.
You'd heard stories about some of those islands. I don't know specifically Tinian, but some of the islands where Japanese were still on those islands 20 years later.
Yeah, right.
Or more. Interesting. Yeah. You were in the Navy as a guard on the camp. Were there mostly naval personnel, or were there Army?
No, it was all naval.
It was all naval that were doing the guard duty.
Right.
So were you under a command system then of naval personnel, or were you working under the Army as guards?
No, it was under naval personnel.
All naval personnel were working guarding the
We had a commander in charge of our camp.
Uh-huh. So what happened if did they have a medical facility nearby? What happened if...
Oh, yeah, we had a doctor.
For the camp?
Right. And he even, checked civilian Japanese for, health problems and stuff.
And the same with the prisoners of war? The Japanese prisoners?
Yeah, and the gooks,
Yeah.
But,
were there any common medical issues in the camp? Or can you remember
really
much for happening?
No.
Medical-wise?
No, not really.
How were most of those prisoners captured? Were they captured right on Tinian?
Well, some of them were captured on Tinian. That's before I got there.
Uh-huh.
But some of them were walk-ins, just like I was telling you.
Yeah.
They'd come in, surrender,
Mm-hmm.
and they'd go to the prison compound.
Yeah. Other than the one Japanese you talked about that had been wounded elsewhere, did many of them have any visible wounds before
not
that?
Not that I know of. He was the only one that that I really more or less communicated with,
Uh-huh.
and then he told me all the stuff that he'd been in the fighting of the Japanese in Burma.
Yeah.
And that's where he got wounded.
Mm-hmm.
But
So
the rest of them, I don't. They could have been some, but
Yeah.
they didn't say anything.
And some probably didn't communicate as
Right.
well as he did as
Right.
others. So tell me a little bit more about when you heard about the bomb. Did you get word that they were building some super bomb?
Well,
Something was coming to Tinian, or how did that process?
No, we never knew nothing. I mean, it was pretty hush secret. I mean, that bomb was on the island for a couple of weeks before we even found out about it.
Uh-huh.
And I just, we didn't realize that it was going to be as powerful as it was.
Yeah.
And it was just, ordinary day. You did your duties, and that was it.
Yeah. So when the B-29s took off, You didn't know? Did you know for sure that they were carrying something special a certain day, or
yes,
you just saw them come by every day?
That night, yes, but we didn't know what plane. And in fact, I was on guard duty that night. But like I said, every 15 minutes there was a 29 taken off, and
Yeah.
I didn't realize, or nobody knew which plane had the bomb,
Yeah.
because they didn't detonate the bomb until they was over Japan.
Right. Yeah. So, when did you hear about the success of the dropping of the bomb? Then was that the next day, or was that pretty
probably the
immediate?
next day? But everybody didn't realize it could be so devastating. And but everybody was happy to see the war end.
Yeah. Yeah. So when the bomb was dropped, the war ended within a week or so, 10 days after that.
Right.
How was communication translated to you? Were you kept pretty up to date about events happening and information coming from the War Department, or?
No, not really. Not really. I don't know. In the interviews, I forgot to mention, one of the things I always remember the most is every evening at 5 o'clock on our loudspeaker system, and I don't know if you probably heard it from the other guys, Tokyo Rose come on the air. And she put out this propaganda, how your family misses you, you should be home, and all that good stuff,
Yeah.
And I tell you, I just didn't even want to listen to her anymore, because it just drive you bananas.
Yeah. So how was she broadcast? Was that just broadcast from the hills somewhere? Or how did they
No,
broadcast
that was coming shortwave from out of Japan, I think. As far as I know.
Yeah.
The
The
no,
receivers.
she wasn't on the island. No.
But if you were at a radio receiver, you could pick up that signal.
We had loudspeakers around the camp, and then they would pick it up and put it on.
Yeah, and that's pretty much what Tokyo Rose was, all propaganda.
Yeah, right.
Said that your wives were dating Hollywood people and all that stuff.
And I remember rum and Coca-Cola song come out back then, and then she'd play that, and
Really?
just anything to kind of irritate you.
Yeah. Interesting. When you were, are there anything specific that you remember, or any unusual events happened in the camps while you were there, out of the ordinary, that was an incident? Were there anybody ever tried to escape or anything like that?
No,
that occurred while you were there?
we never had too much trouble. There's some things I can tell you, or I can't tell you, but it was just basically everything was pretty normal. I mean,
pretty routine, the things that were going on.
Yeah. Especially after the war, and everybody was happy and ready to come home.
Yeah. After the war, after the bomb was dropped, how did your job change much?
No.
Or was everything pretty much routine and you started processing people out at that point?
Until we got everybody out of there. And then by the time we got everybody processed and got them off the islands, well, then a lot of the guys that had a lot of points, were the first ones to go.
Yeah.
And like I said, I signed up for the duration of the war. I should have been one of the first ones, but it didn't make no difference to me.
Yeah.
But I come out on the point system too.
I'm assuming it got a little quieter because the B-29s probably weren't taking off anymore.
Yeah. See, Iwo Jima and Okinawa were invaded after I was there. So, and this one kid that I knew here, he was older, and I knew his brother, but I didn't know it. His uncle told me. He was a professor up here at the college. I don't know if you ever heard of Mike Shader or not. And Mike, that was his cousin, Deebs. And he was first mission, he was a radioman on a B-29. And they had 1 mile to go from Saipan. They was coming back from a raid. And they got within 1 mile of the runway, and something happened to the plane, and they crashed in the channel. See, there was a channel between Saipan and Tinian, 5 miles wide. And they crashed in there. He lost his life.
Yeah.
And I knew his folks, and I didn't know it at the time, and I run into his father. I like to fish, and I run in and fishing a lot of times. And always, after I found out about it, I was so sad, that I couldn't tell him that I was over there when it happened, but,
Yeah.
it just probably maybe better off.
Yeah.
His dad and mother were nice people.
Were there a lot of, you mentioned there were a lot of people after the war ended officially. You began to process Japanese out. You said a lot of your friends or a lot of the personnel Americans that were servicemen that were there, they began to leave too on a point system.
Oh, right.
So as 1945 turned into 1946, there were probably fewer and fewer people on the island.
Well, they just kept taking men out of there all the time.
Yeah.
And I asked Jess here not too long ago, I always wondered whatever happened to him, and I guess there's a couple big casinos on it now.
I do not know what's on there.
Yeah. So
It's pretty important to World War II because the air
because
base.
they got the runways, these big people can fly in there.
Yeah.
But it was a lot of coral. Well, it's all coral. But there's nice spots in it.
Were you one of the last servicemen on the island, or was there still quite a few left when you left?
I come home pretty early.
In May of '46, there were still quite a few people.
Oh, yeah.
Were all the Japanese pretty much off the island except those that were in the hills?
Yeah, before I left, but we had them pretty well cleaned out.
Were you pretty much just cleaning up camps and stuff after that then?
Just more or less, processing for evacuation.
So how many came back with you? Was it quite a large group that came back with you when you?
I was the only one.
Really?
Yeah. They took me across the channel on a tugboat. We had a tugboat in our outfit, and they took me across to Saipan so I could catch a ship out of Saipan. Then I went from Saipan, I went to Peleliu to pick up some guys. So I got a lot of riding.
We had a lot of American military personnel strung all over the place over there.
All over. And, and like I said, the point system, as your numbers come up, he was in the process of leaving.
Yeah. So from there, did you go back to Hawaii?
No, I went to San Francisco.
So you bypassed Hawaii, you came directly back to San Francisco.
Yeah, I went to Oakland, California, and from Oakland, California, why, I never could figure it out because San Diego had a naval station there for discharging, and they sent me all the way to the Great Lakes.
All the way to Michigan, or to Chicago, north of Chicago.
Yeah, Chicago.
Lake Michigan.
Yeah.
Wow. Yeah, you'd think that San Diego had a huge base
there I am right there.
Yeah.
But they sent me way to Great Lakes to get discharged.
So you were landed, were you put on a train then pretty quickly to go to Great Lakes?
Right, from Oakland.
And were there mostly naval personnel on your train, or was it a regular train?
It was mixed. Yeah, there's all kinds of servicemen.
Yeah.
Marines, Army, because a lot of them were coming home.
Yeah. So they sent you to Great Lakes, and then was it just a matter of processing to get you out of the Navy then?
I spent probably, I had to be there on a Monday, so I got there on a Sunday. So, they had details, keep you busy, and Monday they start processing us out.
Yeah.
And then I caught a train to come back to Kearney.
And at that point, you were completely done with the Navy.
Right.
Once they processed you out at
Right.
Great Lakes.
Right.
Was there anything, I've just got a couple more questions, but was there anything in your war service while you were on Tinian or any other incident that might have happened that you forgot to mention that is of importance that probably should be talked about?
Well,
That
no.
you can think of that we haven't covered?
I just, I always thought, like for my grandkids, I just want them to know that I was on the island of Tinian when the bomb took off for Japan. I mean, I always said, it's history.
Yeah, that's pretty important. I mean,
Yeah.
that's
Yeah. So,
with that first bomb.
yeah, right,
When you were processed out, then you came back to Kearney.
right.
Was there? What was the mood of people in Kearney? Of course, that was about a year after, or 6 months after the war was really over.
You didn't have a bunch of people meeting you and waving flags or
Yeah.
nothing.
Were you still in uniform coming back
Oh, yeah.
into Kearney?
Yeah, but yeah, in fact, my folks were gone that evening, and I walked in the house, and I hadn't seen a dog for 2 years, and she just went berserk. I come in and pulled the light chain, turned the light on, and she just went crazy.
So the dog still remembered.
Yeah, the dog still remembered me.
So had you let your folks know, or did you want to surprise them that you were
No.
coming home?
Back then, communications isn't like it
Was
today.
You'd send a letter, but it wouldn't get there till after you got home anyway.
Right, yeah,
So you just happened to get home and they weren't there.
you're right,
Uh-huh.
yeah.
Did you have any other family members, brothers and sisters that were around the house at the time?
Well, they was home, but they weren't home
Yeah.
at the time.
Yeah.
So I had a brother, he was in the Air Force. He spent 23 years in the Air Force,
Mm-hmm.
in the medics.
Did he serve at the end of World War II as well, or is he
was
too young?
Korea and Vietnam both.
Okay. So he was a little bit younger to hit the World War II. He was a
Yeah,
little bit
right,
later.
yeah. He's the one I told you he enlisted when I got out.
Yeah. So
And he liked the service well. He was having trouble in school, and it was probably a good thing for him.
so he was in the Air Force. He
Right.
went in the Air Force.
Yeah, he was a master sergeant.
Well,
He
did real well then.
retired.
Yeah. Did your war service help you later in your career? Anything with your war service that you feel that it benefited you from either what you learned or what your skills you were able to obtain and
Well,
apply?
I think a lot of it was growing up. When you're 17 years old, and going on 18, you're still pretty wet behind the ears.
Yeah.
And I think the service more or less give you a chance to be a better communicator, because I was always pretty bashful when I was a kid, and you'd make a friend here, and then first thing you'd get shipped out, or something happened, and so you'd make another friend. I mean, you always had a friend
Yeah.
in the service. You always did.
Speaking of friendships, did you ever have any reunions with those of you that were on guard duty in the Navy after the war?
No, never did. I mean, I think most of the guys back then, a lot of them were young, and they were just like I was, glad to see the end of it.
Yeah. Went on with the rest of their life.
Yeah, and I don't have no idea what would happen if I wouldn't have went. But I mean, I was a salesman for 40 years. I worked for Coca-Cola for 3 years, and I was a bakery salesman for 37.
Mm-hmm.
And I retired from that when I was 60, and so I've been
Yeah.
living a pretty good life.
Yeah. Well, thank you very much. Thank
Yeah.
you for your service, and thank you
Yeah.
for the interview.